let's talk about how this course will look like for you. Each section has some sort of actionable steps that you are able to follow, such as building websites and sample projects. And everything we use in this course is a tool that companies use in real life. They're the best of the best. So let's look at the course outline. The first part will be an introduction, some basic concepts to get us familiar with the web and how it works. We will start off with how the internet works. What is the history of these technologies? We're going to talk about the history of the web browsers, and I'll actually have you understand the underlying concepts of the internet and how the technologies we have now have come to be where they are. And then we're going to learn HTML5, finally building our first website. We'll also get into some advanced HTML where we're going to build some complex forms and get you really good at this technology. We will then move into CSS, which allows us to style our websites and make them beautiful. Afterwards, we'll get into advanced CSS and using CSS3 features like transitions and gradients. In the advanced CSS section, we'll create a background generator project that is going to be a lot of fun. Once we've mastered how to work with websites using HTML and CSS, we'll then start learning about Bootstrap templates and building your own startup landing page that accepts emails and will actually store the emails of users as people who are interested in your startup. A very useful skill that you'll definitely need in your career, or if you have a business idea that you want to pursue. We will also dive into newer features of CSS like Flexbox and my favorite, CSS Grid, and get really good at doing responsive layouts with CSS. Finally, we finish off part 1 with career of a developer. What does a career of a developer actually entail? What are the salaries? What are the differences between a software developer, mobile developer, software engineer, full stack developer? We're going to cover all of that, and we're also going to talk about the future trends and what skills do you need in the future. From part 1, we move to our next section. In here, we'll start to introduce JavaScript and learn concepts that allow us to learn a real programming language, and the most popular programming language, which is JavaScript. We then move to DOM manipulation, where we'll actually use JavaScript to create actions and behaviors to our websites so they're interactive. And then finally, we're going to learn some advanced JavaScript concepts so that we can use JavaScript to control the machines around us. Now, just knowing HTML, CSS, and JavaScript is not good enough, and you won't be able to grow in your role and command a higher salary just with those 3 skills. I'm going to be teaching you these things coming up because these are the things you should know so that you are miles ahead of the rest. So after the JavaScript section, we're going to start getting into the command line and working with the terminal. We then learn about developer environments, and I'll actually show you what my developer environment on my computer looks like when I'm working. We'll be setting up our own computers with all the tools necessary of a real-life developer, so you can use the same setup when you go and work for somebody or for yourself. We will then learn about Git and GitHub, probably the most important tools of a developer. And I'll show you how teams work with these technologies to create collaborative software. We then get into a fun section, which is a day in the life of a developer. I'll show you what a day-to-day from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., what it looks like and what tools you'll use. I will take you through a sample day at a tech company, just so that on your first day at the job, you won't be surprised. We will then jump to NPM and NPM scripts, a way for developers to share their code, and it's going to open up a whole world of possibilities. In this section, we are also going to create our own customizable portfolio project. So moving forward, you can add the projects from this course to your website and have it as your online resume. Finally, we finish off part 2 with React.js. You'll learn the library that companies like Netflix, Facebook, and Instagram use to build fast, scalable applications. This is one of the highest in-demand skills in the industry. It's so much fun, and I'm really excited about that section. From part 2, we'll move on to the world outside of just the front end. We're going to learn about HTTP, JSON, and Ajax, something that will open up a world of possibilities. We'll learn about the backend basics and what backend developers do. And then finally, I'll introduce you to some APIs, what APIs are, and definitely some really interesting APIs that are out there. This section is really going to open up your world from just being a front-end developer that is really good at building websites to somebody that can create really dynamic applications, and it will set us up for part 4. This is where it gets really, really fun. We're going to start working on our final project called SmartBrain. And we're going to start off by working on the front end. That is using CSS, JavaScript, HTML, and React. We're going to build an image recognition app that's going to be really, really fun. You submit a URL, and using a machine learning API, we're going to detect to see if in that photo there's a face, and then detect where that face is with a square box. We're going to create a sign-in form or registration form, and it's going to be really, really impressive. Something that you're going to be able to use in your portfolio and impress future employers or clients. We then take a break from the SmartBrain project to introduce you to Node.js and Express. This is where I show you how to build a server, how to create a RESTful API, so that when we get into the next section, the SmartBrain server section, we build our own server, so that we're actually able to communicate with the server over HTTP and sign into our app, sign out, have profiles, and do all sorts of really interesting things. From there, we again take a break and learn about databases, a really complex topic, but I'm going to make it simple for you to understand how they work. And in the next section, we're actually going to create our own database using Postgres and connect it to our server, so that at the end, you'll have a fully working app that has a front-end client website, a back-end server, and a server that's working with a database. Pretty much a full-fledged application. And finally, we're going to deploy and launch that application so you know exactly how to put a real-life app that is secure and won't get hacked on the web. And don't worry, I'm going to provide all files for you throughout the sections so that you can just add them to your portfolio, or you can work along the videos as well. Depending on what your learning style is, you can follow along whichever way works best for you. And at the end of the course, I'm also going to have a quick little section of some of my favorite resources to get hired, some of my own advice on finding a job of your dreams. By the end of this course, you're going to learn the skills that will allow you to apply for jobs in the following roles: web developer, software developer, front-end developer, JavaScript developer, or a full-stack developer. You're going to learn the technologies that are actually being used behind tech companies. You're going to be able to build your own websites and applications, but most importantly, you're going to master fundamental concepts in web development so that it sets you up for a bright, long career. I also want to make this course interactive. I'll be making videos of student projects and what others have built in this course like you. I'll also have Q&A videos where, based on the most popular questions or the most popular topics, I'm going to create new videos as they are suggested. We have a lot to cover, but it's going to be a lot of fun. Let's get started. Hello! That was a little bit excessive, but I'm very, very excited to start the course. So in this section, we're going to be talking about browsing the web. It's the first part in the how the internet works section. And some of you are thinking right now, whoa, Andre, like, come on. I know how the internet works. Let's get to the heavy, technical stuff. But this is something that actually took me quite a few years to learn. And I see a lot of people just skimming the surface of this stuff without fully understanding how everything works together. Without having those foundations, it's actually very, very difficult to think about performance, optimizing your site, and so on and so on. So we're going to start off very, very basic, and we're going to learn something that it took me many years to learn. And once I figured this out, everything clicked. So just hang in there. Trust me. I promise you'll learn something new in this section. And we're going to be talking about browsing the web. We have over here a laptop, and we have our web browser, let's say Google Chrome. And we typically like to say, go to Google, and we're going to visit Google. So we type in google.com, and well, what happens technically when we do that? When we enter google.com, we press enter on our keyboard. We ask a question. Who's this google.com fellow? And that question gets asked all the way down to our ISP. ISP is Internet Service Provider, and I put a $ up here, just so you know those are the people that you pay so you can have internet. So if you're in the States, that's Cogeco, Verizon. If you're in Canada, that would be Bell or Rogers. Or, depending on your country, you have your big companies that make a lot of money from internet usage. So they get that request and they send that off to something called the DNS server, so domain name servers. And we'll get into that later on in the course. So don't worry too much about it, but essentially it's a phone book that has the list of all these URLs like google.com, and it has the addresses of them. So exactly like a phone book, they know where google.com is. So they say, hey, I don't know Mr. Google.com personally, but I do know his address. So you should go check him out. So they send off that request back through the ISP, and the website or the web browser, Google Chrome in this case, gets 172.217.723. All right, cool, but nothing's showing up yet. There's no google.com. I can't do any searches yet. Okay, we received what we call an IP address. So think of this as something that every single computer has one. Anything that's connected to the internet has its own address. So the laptop that I'm working on right now has an IP address. Your laptop or computer has an IP address. So this IP address allows the internet to work essentially. It knows our location, our address. So what we do now with google.com, we know this IP address. The browser sends off another request to the Google servers, and it knows where the Google servers are because we have this address. So we go seek it out, and you can think of servers as computers essentially. My laptop could be a server, your computer could be a server. Servers are essentially computers that are sometimes in basements or in huge server farms, and they have a piece of software running that, just like at a restaurant where a server brings you food, it knows how to send you files when you request for them. So we send this off, and the Google servers say, oh yeah, no problem. Let me give you my HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And we'll get into what those are later on in the course, but think of them as just text files. They're text files that Google is going to send to the browser so we can have Google working. So let me just minimize this and show you what it's doing. So we're copying these files, and Google server is saying, yeah, no problem. Thanks for asking for Google. Here it is. And the web browser receives the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So if we go to the next section, boom, we have google.com, and everything's working. Now, that sounded like a whole bunch of stuff that happened in between. And when we're on the internet, everything is quite fast. But yeah, underneath the hood, all of that is happening. And it's crazy to think how fast everything works. Don't take my word for it. Let's just check this process that I'm not just making stuff up for you. If what we learned was correct, technically, we can skip this process, right? I mean, if we know the address of Google, can we just, go into this directly and just, instead of putting in google.com, just put in this in our search bar and it automatically goes to the Google servers? Well, let's try it out. Let's open up Google here. And ooh, what a pretty picture. All right, so we go to google.com. Nothing crazy here. And that's great. But what if instead of that, I put in the IP address? So 172, there's no way I could remember this address, so I've done this before. And I press enter. Look at that, google.com. So as you can see, I'm not lying. It's what's happening. The IP address gets sent to the Google servers. Google servers send us a few files so that we can finally load google.com. In the next section, we're going to do something fun. We're going to break a bit of Google and toy around with the website again to show you how cool all of this technology is. See you in the next one. Bye-bye. Welcome back. In the last section, we talked about how we have google.com, and if we enter an IP address, we essentially get all these files from Google. So if we look back at the diagram that we had, we see here that the Google servers just send us a couple of files, which are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Again, something that we'll cover later on. But for now, based on that knowledge, we should be able to break Google. So let's play with something. If you open up Google Chrome and you go into View, then Developer, then Developer Tools, you're going to have a screen over here that pops up. You might want to move it up and down just so you can see better. Let me just scroll this down a bit so you can see. You'll see over here that there's a little icon on the left with a pointer and a window. If you click on that and now go to the website, you'll see it selects a bunch of different things. So it's just an element selector. So let's just click on this. So when I click on this, it takes me to the part of the HTML file that essentially tells Google to put in Google search here. So based on that, we can do something fun. We can get the value over here of Google search, and let's change it to Andre search. Press enter. Look at that. We now just changed Google to have Andre search over here. That's very, very cool. I want you to play around with that and see what you can do. For example, if I now select this and I'm just like, I don't want this, I'm going to press the delete key and just delete it. Look at that. I can delete that. Okay, I don't like that either. I'm going to press delete on that as well. And let's see. You know what? I want the entire website. I want this entire body thing gone. Delete. Look at that. We just completely deleted Google. Now, you must be freaking out. What happened? Am I going to get sent to jail? I just deleted Google. Well, no, not really. Press enter and Google is back. Now, why is that? Well, if we go back to our diagram, we have Google servers and we were playing around with one of these files and we just modified it. We essentially just said delete, delete. So Google was gone. But when I made that request again, Google servers, no problem. We have these files. They send these files all over again back to the server. Hopefully that made sense to you. We see that the browser essentially is a tool, a piece of software that can receive files from servers, and it knows how to read them so that, look at that, we get pretty Google and we can type in all the searches that we want in the world. All right, let's get to the next section where we talk about the internet backbone. See you in the next one. Bye-bye. Hey there, welcome back. All right, if you thought so far everything's been really, really cool, well, things are going to get a lot cooler. We're going to be talking about the internet backbone. So we recognize this because I've been talking about it for the last couple of lessons. But some of you may have had a question that is, what do the arrows mean? I mean, it's kind of like magic, right? I just told you that we send off the IP address to the servers. The server responds with some files, but this is just magic. Like, what do these arrows mean? So we're going to talk about that in this lesson. And we're going to do that with this really, really fuzzy diagram that I found online from this website. It's not the clearest picture, but it actually has some really important things. So I want to use that to demonstrate to you what the internet backbone is. So as some of you know, the way we connect in our homes, at a coffee shop, or at work is we usually have Wi-Fi, or maybe sometimes we still have people that are using Ethernet cables and connecting through those. But for now, let's just focus on the fact that we have a home and we have Wi-Fi, and this Wi-Fi essentially gives us internet from the router. You can see this little person over here working hard with a router next to him. And this router is connected all the way to something called a modem. And this is something that if you ever signed up for internet or changed providers, you most likely had somebody come to your house and install something. And that's this box over here that essentially allows the ISP, the internet service provider, this big building over here, we remember that, to connect to it. So this modem has these signal towers that transmit signals of, google.com, and it receives these messages. And then this is why I picked this image, just because I think it's incredible. You see this wire that is connected all the way to the ISP, and then the internet service provider, the ISP, is connected to this magical blue cable that is the internet backbone. And something that's really important in this image is the fact that there's Wi-Fi, which is over the air, but at the end of the day, everything is kind of connected through cables. So some of you, or many of you, or all of you might be wondering, what the hell is this internet backbone thing? Sounds cool, but this kind of vague. So I found a really, really cool thing that we can do together. I'll post this website in the notes after this lesson, but if you go over here, you actually see the internet backbone. So let's say we're in Brazil and we wanted to search google.com. Well, from Brazil, from our home, through Wi-Fi, it connects to our router, to our modem, and then all the way to our internet service provider. Let's say it's internet service providers over here. And then through cables, it connects all the way to, let's say, this point over here. And let's say for now that the Google servers are located somewhere in Portugal over here. Well, that signal of me looking for that IP address of Google and looking for those Google files is going to go through this submarine cable. Yeah, you heard that right. It's a physical cable that goes at the bottom of the seafloor from Brazil all the way to Portugal, where the Google servers are. And then the Google server says, yep, I got those files, here they are, and sends it all the way back through the ISP, all the way back to our house. Like, isn't that cool that there's physical cables that are connecting and creating this internet? So, there are times where somebody destroys or something happens where these cable connections are cut off and you sometimes lose internet connection that way. But yeah, the internet backbone is literally just this network all over the world of connected cables so that we can transfer these files all over the world. And just to show you how insane this is, somebody from the Opti project over here, I got this off of Wikipedia, mapped out in, I believe this was in 2015, just 30% of the network. And you can see over here that each one of these dots is an IP address. So a computer that is connected to another computer that is connected to another computer. And that's the internet. The internet is just all these connected computers that are just transferring files between each other. And as web developers, and this is the coolest thing, and that's why I just think everybody should be a web developer, because it's so cool. You're allowing this to happen. You're allowing this transferring of files from one computer to another, transferring knowledge from Brazil to Portugal and all over the world. And you get to be part of it. You get to be part of this network and you get to evolve. When this picture of the internet came to me, I knew that this was the career for me. So hopefully that gets you excited. In the next section, I'm going to show you something really cool, traceroute, before we finish up the lesson and we get into the next sections. So hope that was cool. See you in the next one. Bye-bye. Hello, welcome back. We mentioned in the last lesson that we're going to be talking about traceroute. What is that? Well, I just wanted to finally get the entire picture of the internet across, and I think this is the best way to do it. Now, if you're on a Mac, you're going to press Command Space and look for a program that comes with your Mac called Terminal, and you're going to press Enter and you're going to get this. So it's an application that all Macs have. If you're on a Windows machine, it's called Command Prompt, and in the exercise right after this lesson, I will show you instructions on how to access that as well. We're going to talk about traceroute. And if you remember, we spoke about this image of all these connected things happening and going to the internet backbone, and then google.com finally sends us the files back to our house. And you can actually monitor how that's going to work using traceroute. So if we type in traceroute, and on Windows machine, it's actually traceRT. But for now, we'll just go traceroute. And you can request for whatever website you want. So let's go with google.com. I press enter, and yep, look at that. It gave me a whole bunch of hops that it did. So you can see 1 through 9 here. So it did 9 hops. So that means 9 stops to this address at 172.117.1.14. So again, that looks like the IP address. So again, let's always test our experiments here. If I put that in and press enter, we should get google.com. Let's see. Look at that, google.com. So that's a fun little way of you to see where your requests go, and you can monitor, you can see all these IP addresses are different computers that are trying to locate the Google servers. So go ahead in the next section, there's a little exercise. You can play around with this and just see where all your requests go all over the world. I think it's very, very cool. We're going to finish up in the next section with some fundamentals and what we can do with this knowledge that we have to actually become really good web developers. So see you in the next section. Bye-bye. Welcome back. Good job, you've made it this far. And you're probably asking yourself, Andre, this has been really good, really informative, but where's the coding? I want to start building some websites. And I know, we'll get there, don't worry. But without even realizing it, you just learned some really, really important fundamental skills and something that will take you very, very far in the career of a web developer, because now you know how to improve website performance without a single line of code. And just so you know, we're going to get a little silly here. We're actually going to make sure that you remember these fundamental skills every time throughout these lessons. There's going to be chunks and very important lessons. And to symbolize how important they are, I'm going to get Jean-Claude Van Damme's help. So again, this is an important lesson. This is an important fundamental web developer concept. So Jean-Claude Van Damme, how important is it? All right, so as you can see, very important concept. And what is it? Well, like I said, without writing a single line of code, you now know how to improve a website's performance. So let's think about this. There's three things. We send google.com, we talk to Google servers, and we get these files back. So just looking at this and looking at what you've learned so far, what's one thing that would make sure that this process would be fast? Let's look at the first one. I'm going to give you a second to think. Hopefully you get it. The first one is location of the server. We saw how big the internet backbone is. So if the servers are really, really close to you, let's say you're in the States and the servers are just a couple of kilometers away, that hop is going to be really, really fast versus if it's all the way across the globe. So location of the server is important. And we'll talk about these and how big companies use these to their advantage later on. So that makes sense. Let's look at the next one. So the next one is how many trips. So hopefully, ideally, we just have one trip to the Google servers and Google servers send us all the files that we need back. But as we know, there's new pages, there's searches. So this communication with Google is back and forth, back and forth. And the less trips we have, the faster that we'll be able to get the files. So how many trips? And then finally, size of files. Again, if this HTML file or CSS file or JavaScript file is massive and it's 100 megabytes, well, that's going to be a lot slower to transfer over the internet than it is if it was just a couple of kilobytes. So there it is. These three things are something that you'll take with you, and you'll realize that every time you're building an application, a website, you're going to be thinking about these things. And these are going to help you make sure that you have a performant, fast website. And we're going to take these with us as we go on throughout the course. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye. And welcome back. In this final video, I want to show you what this course is all about, what we're learning in this course, and what we're going to be able to do at the end. You may have heard the term full stack developer, front-end developer, back-end developer. And looking at this diagram, you're starting to recognize that HTML, CSS, JavaScript, you see React in there. We'll get to that. Don't worry about it. But that's what a front-end developer does. The front-end developer is the person who makes sure that when we open up the browser and go to google.com, that we see Google. We see it nice and pretty, laid out beautifully, has a search bar, and essentially anything that a user sees, the front-end developer does. And that is using HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React, and a few other tools. The backend developer, that's the person that works with the server, makes sure that when a browser speaks to it, it serves up those files, and it uses technology such as Node.js, Express.js, which we're going to get into. And then that server is going to talk also to a database. Again, we haven't really discussed that too much, but don't worry, there's going to be a section on it, and that's going to use PostgreSQL, and we're actually going to be learning that as well. So we want to build you up as a full stack developer to be able to work with all these technologies so that everything revolving around a web application you're able to build. So get excited. You're going to learn all of this. It looks overwhelming, but trust me, just like this, how the internet works section, it's all going to make sense. So I'll see you at the next one. Bye-bye. Hello, and welcome back to another video. We actually have a couple of great videos coming up about the history of the web. And you might be asking again, come on, let's get to coding. But this is really important because we need to understand what problems we had in the past and how we found solutions to those problems and where we are at now. We need to understand what this whole thing of being a web developer means and what problems we're solving and what we did in the past and what we do today. So today we're going to talk about Tim Berners-Lee, the person who invented the World Wide Web in 1989. And I have a picture of him right here. And we're going to talk about him because he's the first web developer. And in order to explain that concept, we need to make a distinction between the internet and the World Wide Web. I have this website that I'll share in the links below. It's really, really good if you kind of want to get a history lesson. But essentially, the internet started off with the ARPANET in 1969, basically a military project, and it was more of a test. It connected a few universities such as Utah, UCLA, and throughout the 70s, the 80s, it kept growing. But there was one problem that they had, and that was essentially for the academics, they needed a way to share documents. And up until the World Wide Web existed, the internet was there, but it was really, really hard for computers to communicate with each other, to share academic papers between each other. Most of the time, each computer had their own way of doing things. You can think of this as languages. So it's kind of like communicating with people from different countries and a language that you don't know. Yeah, sure, you can make it work, but it's very, very difficult. So that was the problem. And Tim Berners-Lee, what he did, and he was working at CERN at the time, he actually created the World Wide Web. And what the World Wide Web is, it's the www that we see whenever we type in google.com over here, is essentially a common language that computers can speak, with the World Wide Web saying, hey, from now on, everybody, if we want to communicate together, if we want to share images or if you want to share files, let's just have this agreed upon language, agreed upon protocol in order to share these documents together. So that's what it is. The servers, the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, the browsers all work on top of the World Wide Web. So you can think of it as the internet is your phone and the World Wide Web is Instagram that runs on your phone. So it's essentially a decentralized application. Now, how is Tim Berners-Lee the first web developer? He actually created the first browser and the first server. And later on, we're actually going to talk about what he did with the files over here as well. But he created the very, very first server and web browser, but also the first website. And they actually still have a copy of it. This is the very first website ever. And it's from 1991, and this is what it looked like. He created this ability for people to communicate and link to other documents so that we have this growing knowledge base of the world. In the next lesson, we're going to be talking about the history of these files, what they mean, what problem they solved, and how they came to be. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye. And welcome back. In the last section, we talked about the World Wide Web and the internet and what the differences were. And then I promised you that we'll finally talk about some HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So I've been vaguely referencing these files and just told you that they're simple text files for now. But what are they specifically? Well, initially, if you remember, we had Tim Berners-Lee who created the very first website. And this website uses HTML. And HTML, that's the first file over here, is a way for us to just write text on website. And these texts on websites can also have these things called hyperlinks that can link to other parts of the website. So that's what happened in 1991. 1991, we had a way for us to share documents. And this can link to another website, another file, another research paper. But as you can see, it wasn't the prettiest. So in 1995, 1996, two technologies came into being. One was CSS and one is JavaScript. Now, what did they allow you to do? Well, CSS solved the problem of, well, this is nice and all, but it wouldn't be nice if we had some visual aspects. We can toy around with this website and make it look pretty. And then JavaScript said, well, ideally we'll be able to have something like this website where, I can click over here, I can shop now, I can put in my credit card and get these fancy slippers, and I can do all this interactive things with my website. So let's play around with this and try and incorporate from this basic HTML file to add some CSS and JavaScript to this page. The way we're going to do that is we're going to go into View, Developer, and Developer Tools. So you might remember this from our previous lessons. So once you click on that, you'll get this pop up at the bottom of the screen. For some of you, it might be on the right side, but it doesn't matter. You'll get both things. And we've seen this before. And if you look at the top over here, it says HTML. And that's it. HTML is this. It's this file that has this weird syntax that describes how this web page should look in text. So you can see over here, it says the World Wide Web. These are just text. On the right side over here, you'll see something called styles. So styles will actually let you add styles to the website, as the name suggests. And that's what CSS is. If we click on HTML here, and actually let's click on body. Without knowing any CSS or anything, if we define something like color, semicolon, and then let's go blue, it changes the text color to blue. Chrome lets you play around with websites and actually inject some CSS into this HTML. Without knowing any CSS, we can kind of play around, type in a letter, and it will have a drop down. So let's see over here if we can do background color. Let's make it, I'm going to press tab, I'm going to do red. Make the website really, really, well, frankly, pretty ugly. But that's CSS right here. We've just added some CSS to this basic website. Let's turn this red color off because it is not pretty. Okay, so HTML, text and links, CSS, pretty colors. Now, how can we add some JavaScript? So remember, we have 3 files over here. JavaScript came along and said, these are great. We have these beautiful text websites that link to other pages. And we have CSS that can make websites really, really pretty. But would it be nice to have some interactivity, to have drop-down menus to make websites like they are now, interactive? We can actually do this, again, with the developer tools. If you click on console over here, without knowing any bit of JavaScript, for now we're just going to show you a simple JavaScript line. And we're going to type in alert, and let's say, hi there, exclamation marks. And I press enter. And look at that. We just made the very first website ever made interactive with JavaScript. Now, obviously, this doesn't do anything, but hopefully this shows you where we were before in 1991 to where we are now. Websites that are interactive, full of JavaScript, CSS, and of course, HTML. See you in the next one. Bye-bye. And welcome back to the second web developer fundamental. Another very important aspect of being a web developer, and that is the fact that we have multiple web browsers. Now, if you remember, Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the World Wide Web, created it because we needed a standard way to share documents amongst each other. And through HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, we're able to read these files and actually have beautiful websites. Now, when we send these files over, each of these browsers read the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and lay out the web page for us. But as you can see, each one of them is owned by a company and is a different browser. So that means they all have to agree on how they're going to read the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Because if they don't all agree, then, well, we need to create different files specific for each browser, because each one of them has a different idea of what HTML, CSS, and JavaScript is. And you know what? When the World Wide Web got started, we had something called the browser wars, where each browser was kind of doing its own thing, implemented different things, and we still have that to this day to some extent. There is a governing body which kind of creates these standards now, but it is still a pain point for developers where we need to figure out that whenever we send our files to the web browser, it all looks the same. And that is one of the biggest problems we have as developers, and you'll see tools later on in this course that try to solve that issue. But you'll always encounter this problem where we want to make sure that wherever your browser gets rendered, anybody can see your website. And not only that, we also have mobile phones now that access the internet. We have iPads. So now, not only do we have to worry about different browsers and whether they agree on what code works in each of these files, we also have to make sure that our websites look good on small screens, on big screens, on all sorts of different screens. And that is a very important concept, something that when you get to become a web developer, you'll encounter this problem where you have to test on each device, each browser to make sure everything works. And we'll use some tools that have developed over the years to solve these problems so that it's not as much as a pain point as it is or as it was. All right, one more lesson to go, and then we're going to get coding. See you on the other side. Bye-bye. And welcome back to the final lesson from the history of the web. I wanted to finish things off with this diagram that we've seen before in previous lessons with a few minor differences. And that is, I wanted to show you how web applications were built in the early 2000s. So they were built with technologies that we've come to familiarize ourselves with. We have HTML, CSS, JavaScript, but we also had jQuery. And jQuery was a library that allowed JavaScript to be written in a simple, clean way that allowed us not to worry too much about working in one browser, then the other. It created this environment for JavaScript to flourish. But it is an outdated technology and there's better ways of doing things. So it is not used very often and you'll see it less and less in job postings. And then on the back end, we have the LAMP stack. And that stands for Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. And in those days, backend developers used PHP to write files that allowed us to have logic on the servers. And then we had Apache. So if you ever use something like HostGator and you had to log into cPanel or any of those very common hosting platforms, most likely they're running Apache server. And what it is, it's a software that really efficiently serves up files. And PHP is a language that it's still being used today, and Facebook actually uses it, but that's because their website was built in the early 2000s. It is now a very unpopular, let's say, language in terms of growth and job opportunities. Then we also had MySQL, which it's still being used, but again, if you're looking to get hired, you want to look for skills that are highly employable, people are looking for them, and there are still very few developers that know it really well. Well, that's what we're learning in this course. In this course, we're going to learn HTML5, CSS3. We're going to learn JavaScript. We're going to learn React, probably the biggest library for JavaScript. And we're going to learn about node servers, Node.js, Express.js. We're going to learn about PostgreSQL and also MongoDB. So we're learning all these things in order for us to build clean, fast, and bug-free web applications. so that we can stand on shoulders of giants and create wonderful applications that we're proud of. So get excited. All the theory stuff we're done with. We're going to start coding. We're going to start off with HTML, then get into CSS, and then finally JavaScript and React. And don't worry, we'll get to the back end as well. So I'll see you in the next section. Bye-bye. Hello, and welcome back to a very exciting section. Why is it exciting? Well, we finally get to code, and we're going to start off by learning HTML and then finally building our very first website. In order for us to get started, we need to set up our environment. And we do that by, let's open up Google Chrome, and we're going to search for Sublime Text 3. This is a text editor that a lot of developers use. I myself have used it for years, absolutely love it. In your day-to-day job, you'll use something like this. I highly recommend Sublime Text. If you have a Mac, the version over here. If you have a PC running Windows, you'll have the download link for Windows. So for me, I'm going to download for the Mac. And you can see here it's downloaded, and I can drag it to my applications folder if I want. And we can double click. And if this is your first time downloading Sublime Text, you'll get something like this to give it permission to load. And there you go. We have Sublime Text. Now, what is a text editor? A text editor is a program that allows us to write code. You can see over here on the right-hand side of Sublime Text that it just says plain text. So I can type anything that I want, and there's nothing much different than if you wrote this in Word or a text file. But the power with a text editor, especially with something like Sublime that's geared towards coding, if you click on plain text here, you'll have a whole bunch of options of what type of code you're writing. So in our case, we're doing HTML. So if I click on HTML, nothing changes except for the bottom part over here. But now, if I type something, well, everything looks the same. But if I start typing HTML, it'll actually recognize it and help with syntax. So here now, if I write HTML, look at that. We get a nice little color completion. So for us, for now, we're going to be writing HTML. You can see over here that there's different options. There's, where is it? There's CSS, JavaScript, which we'll learn later. So we're going to be using Sublime Text for this. For now, click on HTML, and let's write our very first web page. In order for us to have a web page, we write HTML, which stands for Hypertext Markup Language. So bear with me here. This is going to be new, but keep in mind that this is exactly what every single HTML page has. These are the set of rules that all HTML files must follow. And it goes like this. We define a doc type, and don't worry, I'll get into what that means in the next video. Then we have HTML, and we close these tags, HTML. The second part, we have a head and a closing head. You can see over here some patterns forming. Don't worry, I'll get back to these tags and explaining what they do in a bit. And then we also have body and then closing tags. And finally, here in the head, we have something called a title tag. Okay, so this over here is the rule that every single HTML file must follow. Just looking at this right now without knowing any HTML, you can get an idea of what everything means. So HTML, we're defining that this is an HTML. We're saying that this is the head of the HTML with the title. And we're saying that this is the body of the HTML. So let's try something here. Let's save this file. And we're going to save it. Let's do desktop. And we're going to call it index.html. You can see that it's already completed the HTML syntax for us. Save. And we have an index.html file here. Let's drag this all the way down to our Google Chrome and open it up. And well, nothing happens. But let's add a bit of text to it. So in the title, I'm going to say my first website, exclamation mark. And then in the body, I'm just going to put hello there. Okay, so if I save this, and just to show you from now on, I'm going to be doing Command S to save, just because it'll be faster. And now, if I refresh this page, I have hello there. And you can see the power over here of what we just did. We have hello there as the text, which is in the body. And then we also have my first website as the title. And you can see over here in the file that we're referencing index.html on my desktop. So we can see here that we have HTML, we have the head, which we haven't really talked about yet, but we see that the title is in the head, kind of like a header. And then we have the body, which by looking at this, we can assume that it's whatever shows up onto the web page. Before we expand on this and make it a little bit, well, prettier, because now it's just simple text, I want to reiterate the fact that what we've just done is very similar to what a server does. If we go back to our mockups here, you remember that when we enter google.com, the servers send us an HTML file back. When we move the index.html file all the way down to Google Chrome, that's what we just did. We mimicked a server and we gave it to the browser to load up the HTML file. And because browsers are built to know what HTML files are, it can read the syntax and say, okay, yeah, this is an HTML. Okay, you want my title to be my first website, and you want my body to say hello there. That's perfect. These are the default HTML rules that you'll see all the time. It is a little bit confusing at first, but this is it. You just have to remember that there is a tag, so an HTML tag, a head tag, a title tag, a body tag. And these tags usually have an opening and a closing. There's some exception to this rule, and we'll get into that a little bit later on in the videos. But just remember this for now. So I want you to try creating your very first website and seeing how it works. And once you're done with that, I want to show you that Sublime Text actually has a nice shortcut, so you don't have to keep writing those tags over and over. So the way you do that is you type in HTML and then press the tab key. And it loads all this up for you. Okay, so now that we've done this, I want you to go off and create your very first website. I know it's very, very simple. You can put whatever you want in the title, and you can put whatever you want in the body. And in the next video, we're going to start expanding on our first website. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye. And welcome back. In the previous video, we went over the basic rules that all HTML files must follow. And I kind of glossed over this doc type HTML tag. And I did that on purpose because I want you to develop another developer fundamental concept. And that is the fact that most of the time, as developers, there's so much information out there, there's no way that you can keep all of that in your head. And as developers, we must get really, really good at problem solving. So for the doc type, let's say if I was working and somebody gives me this file and I say, okay, I got this, that's good, but I'm not sure what doc type is. Well, again, we want to get really good at Googling here. And I know it sounds silly, but trust me, as a developer, you're going to be Googling a lot and going to get really, really good at looking for answers and understanding meanings behind code. So if I go into doc type HTML and we Google that, one of the first things we get is the EE3 School. And this is a resource that I highly, highly recommend. It will actually explain what the doc type is and even show you a demo of what it does. You can read into this and get more familiar with it, but the general rule and the concept behind doc type is that doc type says to the browser, hey, just a heads up, this file is going to use HTML5. And we'll get into what HTML5 is, but right now HTML has evolved from back in the day when Tim Berners-Lee invented it to where it is now, and it has developed and evolved so that it has a few more tags, it has a few more features, and this is the way for us to say, hey, browser, we're going to be using HTML5, so please make sure that you load the website properly. And we'll get into what those new tags are and some of the new syntax is. But again, most likely in your day-to-day job, you're going to be writing this at the top because we're writing in HTML5. If that ever changes and something new comes along, we might change this, but doc type, that's what it is. But the key concept here is that I really want you to start Googling. And anytime you see in my videos something that you don't fully understand or you want to dig a little bit deeper, you really want to grow those roots of your foundation so that you really understand how the landscape works. Okay, so I just wanted to get that concept across that as a developer, you really want to understand how things work and what they mean. And you'll come across in your day-to-day many things that it's very easy to just on the surface copy and paste or just look at an example and do it without fully understanding what it does. But the developers that get really, really good salaries, really good jobs, and are considered senior developers are the ones that fully understand all the meaning behind the things that they do. We're going to be taking that throughout the course and making sure that we develop those fundamentals. But anytime, like I said, you have any questions or you don't understand something fully, I do encourage you to Google and get the answers because there's a ton of free resources out there for you to get fully comfortable with a topic. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye. Welcome back. In this video, we're going to expand on our knowledge and introduce you to a few more HTML tags and make this website look a little bit prettier than just hello there. To get started, I'm just going to move the screens around so you can see better. All right, so we have the left and right. And again, just to make sure everything works, if I change anything here to boo, and then I click save, and then I refresh the page, I have everything updating. Perfect. Now, these aren't the only HTML tags that you'll encounter. There's actually a ton of them. And if you go back to the w3schools.com, you'll see over here all the HTML tags that exist. There's a lot of them. We're only going to be going through, I would say maybe 10 or 15 or so, because those are the only ones that, well, technically that I've used in many years of development. There's a few things on here that I've never even heard of, I've never used. You can always look these up and learn them yourself, but I'll say that there's about 10 or 15 tags that are used 99% of the time, and those are the ones that you'll encounter. So we'll go through some of those most popular ones. And HTML doesn't really get any harder than this. This is the syntax. As long as you get used to these little signs and structure, you're pretty much a HTML developer. So the first tag that I want to introduce you to is the h1 tag. So the way that I have it here is actually not right. You want to make sure that everything is surrounded by a tag. So a web browser right now can see boo and just print out boo. But if you want to do it right, you'd want to put something like an h1. And an h1 tag, if I save this and I refresh, we get what we call a header. So that is a header and then 1. What does 1 mean? Well, it actually goes all the way up to 6. So if I change this to 2, and I'm not going to do every single one. Let's just do another one. h6, boo, h6. And if I save this and refresh the page, you can see that there's different sizes in the text. So that's the header tag. And again, if I scroll through the W3 schools and I go to the H, you see over here that there's the header tags explained here. And this website is really, really cool because you can actually click on try it yourself and you can play around with different things. Click run and it changes it for you. So again, this is a really, really good website for you to get familiar with all the tags. But again, we're going to stick to our website for now. Another thing that I want to introduce you to is something called a p tag or a paragraph tag. A paragraph tag lets you have paragraphs. So now if I refresh, well, there's not much different from what we had before, which was no tags and just saving it. Refresh. But you can see the difference when I copy and paste this and have a few paragraphs versus this. Let's see what happens. So I save this. You'll see over here that with Sublime Text, after, I don't know, I want to say about maybe like 20 saves, it'll ask you to make a purchase because technically this is an unregistered one. You can ignore it for now, just click cancel. Again, it's just one annoying thing that will pop up every now and then. I actually have a registered Sublime Text. I just wanted to show you this error so you're not surprised when you see it. Use Sublime Text for as long as you need it for free. When you start getting into the developer role and working full-time with it, I do recommend that you make a purchase. It's a great program and you still get everything through the unregistered. You just have this pop-up that shows up after a few saves. But anyway, from now on, I'm going to be using a registered Sublime account. I just wanted to show you that error. If I refresh the page here, you'll see that I have the paragraphs show up nicely, but these unstructured pieces of text, well, everything's kind of in line and HTML doesn't really know what to do with it, so it puts everything on one line. I also want to show you one other quick trick in Sublime Text. So writing this gibberish is not very exciting and kind of takes a bit of time, and developers are lazy. We want to make sure that everything is done fast and efficient. So if you actually put lorem here and then press tab, you'll get lorem ipsum paragraphs. So let's do that. I'm going to delete that, lorem tab, and then one more lorem tab. Perfect. Let's save that and refresh, and we have nice paragraphs. As you can see, we have some tags and what we call nested tags. So you can see that the body is the parent, and Sublime Text actually lets you close and open these. So you have the body tag, you have the header tags, which are children of the body tag, and then we have p tags. A lot of people get confused in the naming. I've mentioned these as tags, so essentially anything that has this syntax is a tag, but this is called an H1 element. So that's when it's an entire block of functionality with content inside it. So again, tags, and then this is an H1 element. Again, it's just naming, but you'll hear tags and elements kind of used interchangeably, but those are the specific differences. All right, let's get into some of the more exciting things. Let's say, for example, I really want to emphasize lorem ipsum here. Well, I can use another tag, b tag, and then we close it at lorem ipsum. And let's make the screen here a little bit bigger just so you can see. There you go. So we have the b tags over here, and if I click save, I refresh. Oops, no, we don't want to translate this page. We see that this is now bolded. Again, let's make it a little bit bigger. There you go. Now, this syntax is actually not used anymore, or it's not recommended. Obviously, it still works. But there was a problem that HTML was initially used for websites that ran on computers, on PCs, on Macs. And now we have things such as mobile phones and iPads. Although the bolded text, and we actually have another one, which was the italicized I. Although we had this, for most phones, some of them didn't have ability to bold the text and didn't have the ability to italicize. Or some screen readers, which people who are visually impaired use, didn't really understand the meaning behind italicize and bold. So now we use something called strong for bolded, and refresh. And then for italicized, we use EM for emphasis. And there you go. Now, the reason this change was made was a move towards something called semantic HTML, and we'll get into that into a later lesson. But just know that there's some tags that have evolved over the years, and it's part of why HTML5 exists. We'll get into that a little bit more, but just wanted to give you a quick note on that. All right, I think that's enough for now. We're going to get into more tags in the next video. For now, play around, and I'll see you in the next one. And welcome back. In the previous video, we talked about a few of the common tags that HTML uses. And we're going to expand on that knowledge and learn a few more. So I'm going to delete these. And I'm going to teach you about something called a ordered list. So an OL tag. And within this tag, we have list items. Banana. And another list item. Do apple. And lastly, let's do orange. So if I save this, again, I refresh, and we have banana, apple, orange. So you can see here, this is how you make lists. And this is an ordered list. So you can see we have 1, 2, 3. If we want to make it without the numbers, we use something called an unordered list. And again, I save that and refresh, and we have these. Now there's also subfields that you can use. So again, this is all about nesting and having parent tags and children tags. So let's say within apples, we wanted to have, let me structure that a little bit cleaner. There you go. Within apples, we also want to emphasize that there is the Fuji apple and there is Honey Crisp. Well, I can't think of a third type of apple, so I'm just going to delete that. If I save this and refresh, well, we have a nested list. There you have it. We have your list items. I'll see you in the next video where we're going to learn about putting images into our website and self-closing tags. See you in the next one. And welcome back. In this video, we're going to be learning about self-closing tags. Up until this point, we've used HTML tags that have the opening and then the closing, which has this slash in it. Now, there are a few elements that don't have this syntax, but they have something called self-closing tags. So let's say here between Fuji and Honey Crisp, I want to have a bit of a line break. I can use something like BR here, break. And if I save this and I refresh, we have a little line break. There's also HR, which is horizontal. So you get a horizontal line, if I refresh, right through here. HR, break, just have one single element, self-closing. You might also see something like this, and that is something from the old version of HTML, which uses XHTML. You can read up more about it on your own, but just keep in mind that with HTML5, we're just going to be using this. So obviously on web pages, there's going to be images. So would it be nice if there was a picture of a Fuji apple here? Let's see how we can do it. So with an image tag, and let's think about this critically. If I didn't know what an image tag is and I wanted to add an image to my HTML file, well, if I Google image HTML tag, again, one of the first websites that pops up is the W3 Schools. And I'll show you exactly how an image tag works. If I click try yourself, you can see it in action. You can play around with it. But you can see here that an image tag is a self-closing tag. There's no closing image tag, just one single tag. And if I do image, and we have something called source here. And this is something called an attribute. Some HTML tags can have something called attributes, which add special properties to the specific tag. So an attribute always has a value attached to it. And the image source, that's what SRC stands for, tells us where the image is coming from. So let's find an image of Fuji apple. Let's go images. Oh, I like this one. Let's do view image. and it'll give us the link of where this image is. So I'm just going to copy that, paste it in here. Let's go back to our example here. We can see here that there's a few more attributes that we can add to an image tag. But for now, we can just leave it here. Close the tag. You can see that Sublime text adds the nice highlighting for us. And if I save this, go back to our website, and I click refresh, I get this massive Fuji apple. And obviously that's too big. Ideally, we can make it a little bit smaller. Again, if we go back into the example, you'll see that it has width and height. So we can actually just copy that and add it to the attributes so that we specify the width, and this is in pixels. So I save that, I refresh, and look at that, we have the Fuji apple. It looks very, very pretty. Let's add the picture for Honeycrisp as well. I'm going to do this fast. You should be able to just copy this image. And again, we want to make it the same size as the previous one. So I'm going to leave the width and height the same. And let's find an image of a Honeycrisp apple. So Honeycrisp apple images. Well, it looks quite similar, doesn't it? And view image. Let's copy the source from here. I'm going to save that, go back to our website, and let's refresh. And look at that. We have our apples. So image tags are very, very useful. You might be asking yourself, what is the alt attribute mean? And this is something that you can actually read up on. So if you scroll down, if you look over here, you can see that alt specifies an alternate text for an image. So again, this is something that can be used by screen readers, and you can define what the image is of. So in here, the alt is smiley face, so that when a screen reader reads it, says, oh, in this part of the website, there is a smiley face. Just to recap, we learned about self-closing tags, which don't require two of them, so an opening and a closing tag, just a single one. So we used BR for line break, we used HR for a horizontal line, and then we have the image tag that also has to have some attributes. So it has a source, which tells us where to grab the image from. It has a width attribute, a height attribute with a value of 42 pixels and 42. All right, I'll see you in the next lesson. Bye-bye. And welcome back. In the previous videos, we talked about some of the most common HTML tags and how the HTML document is read by the browser. However, we've missed one critical feature of HTML. And if we go back to our diagram here that we should remember from the first section, the HTML file gets sent to us, but the power of HTML is in its ability to link to other documents. So if I go back here to our website, it's a simple one-page website, but I can't really click on Fuji or Apple or banana. It doesn't link to anything. There must be an HTML tag that we can use for that, right? Well, yes, there is. It's called an anchor tag. So an anchor tag is very easy, just an A. And this anchor tag has something called an href, which is an attribute, and it's the hypertext reference. So in this href, you'll be able to link to something. So let's close this A tag. It has an opening and a closing tag. And if I save this and refresh the page, well, nothing happens because you need something in the anchor tag. So let's do new page. I save that, I refresh, and we have new page here. Now if I click this, nothing happens. You can see that it has the link and the mouse changes images, so it's clickable, but nothing happens. Well, that's because we need to specify where we want the link to go. Now let's think about this. If we want to link to a new page, we don't really have another new page. If you remember, we only have index.html. Wouldn't it be great if there was another file that we can link to? Well, let's create another file. Let's open up Sublime Text actually. I'm going to say File, New File. I'm going to save this as a new page, and we're going to save it to desktop. And see over here how when I went to Sublime Text, it's now a plain text. I need to make sure that this is an HTML file, so I can just do .html, save, and Sublime Text automatically adjusts to the HTML. So again, I can type in that short command, HTML and tab that comes with Sublime Text. And let's do the title, new page, and the body. We can just do a header that says, this is the new page. If I save this, great. We have a new page. And if I go to my desktop here, you see that I have new page and index.html. So how do we link these two together? Well, it's very simple. We open up Sublime again, and within index.html, the href can now say we're linking to new page.html. Let's save that and let's give it a try. Refresh the page, click, and this is a new page. Awesome, but to go back, we have to press the back symbol. So let's link back to the original file. Again, we can do this by p tag, which is for paragraph. I'm going to say go back. Close that tag. But hold on a minute. I need an anchor tag, right? If I just save this and refresh the page, I say go back. But what if you really, really want this to be a paragraph? Or let's say you want this to be an H2, but you also want it to be an anchor tag. Well, that's very simple. You just wrap it in an anchor tag. And just so it's nice and clear, we're going to have the nice spacing here. And again, an anchor tag must have an href, which tells us where to go. And we want to go to index.html. So index.html, save, and refresh. Let's go back. Let's go to the next one and back. So this is the power that comes with HTML, this ability to link to other pages. And yeah, we can have text, we can have lists, we can have images, but the true power is in this linking ability. In the next episode, we're going to expand on this. I'll see you in that one. Bye-bye. And welcome to the student Q&A section. So as students take this course, usually I get a bunch of questions. Some of them are really, really good. Some of them I get often. And we're going to use these Q&A sections for me to make a reply video to answer some of those really, really good questions. And the first one we're going to tackle for this video is index.html. If we go back to our example that we had, you've noticed that I've always used index.html as the first page, and then we created a new page.html. Now you might be asking yourself, why index.html? Why not home.html or apples.html? And you could actually do that, but I can explain this really well by looking at this diagram. Most of the time, there are more than a few HTML files. You saw that with our example, we had our index.html and also new page.html. But when we make that request to, let's say, google.com, how does the server know which HTML to return first for the homepage? And you could go into the server and configure it and tell it, you know what, I want about.html to be the first page. But by default, most servers just say, I'll return index.html. If I see index.html in the servers, I'll just return that. So this is just a common practice that you'll see in a lot of the projects at a lot of the websites that you'll work with, is that index.html is usually, you can think of it as the homepage, the first HTML file that the server returns. And if anybody in the index.html clicks on a link, then it will return whichever link they return. So that would be, let's say they click on about anchor tag, then they'll get about.html. So that's it. That is your answer to your question. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye. And we got another Q&A video for you. And this one is going to be talking about something that you may have seen yourself while following along these videos. And that is the fact that this file over here is different than, let's say, if you go to a website and you see HTTPS. What does that mean? If you go into our example, you also saw here that we have an anchor tag that references newpage.html. It has nothing like file or HTTP in front of it. And then you also saw that the images here are referencing some sort of a website that links to a picture. So what's the difference here? The difference here is that the first is using the file protocol. And that means that this web page, I can't really access it outside of my computer. This is using something called a relative path. If I go into my index.html, I am saying to link to newpage.html relative to where index.html is. So if we go to our desktop, you see that index.html lives in the same directory, which is the desktop, as newpage. So I can reference it through here. If I created a new folder, let's say test, I would have to reference it this way. So let's check here. If I save this and go into the web page, refresh and click new page, I'll get your file was not found. But now if I go into my desktop and create test and I put the new page in here, and let's bring back everything, refresh and click on new page, this is now working. And you can see over here that I'm accessing it through desktop test newpage.html. So that's called a relative path. So relative to where index.html page is, I am saying index.html, I want you to access from test new page HTML. If you look at the images, you'll see that we have something different. We're accessing the image through HTTP, which we'll get into later videos when we talk about servers, but this is how we access files over the internet. If I wanted this anchor tag, this new page, to actually link to something, maybe another website, maybe to this hilarious GIF, well, I can copy this link, open up my Sublime Text, and now I can just copy this with the HTTPS protocol. And now this is an absolute link. No matter where I reference this, if I put it into newpage.html or index.html, no matter what, this link will get me to this GIF. So let's test that out. I save this, I refresh, and I click on new page, and look at that. We have the GIF. All right. Hopefully that answers your question. We'll get into HTTP and HTTPS later on in the course. But for now, keep that in mind that there is absolute path and then there is relative path. I'm going to fix that so we have it back for the next video. I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.